Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our wega virtual breakfast. My name is Nicolas Schattenbrand. I'm leading the clinical development informatics groups at wega. And just want to make a short intro just before taking the talk from Billy Hamsel. First of all, so the topic today is more related to artificial intelligence and disease modeling. As you know, artificial intelligence has many potential applications in clinical development. And it is used at the moment for a lot of innovation for transforming the way we are performing, designing and performing clinical trials. It is used in the selection and optimization of primary and secondary endpoints in study design, and also in developing novel patient endpoints. And today it's more related to model disease using real-world data. So the title of the presentation today is AI-powered disease modeling in real world for value-based clinical development. And before starting this presentation, just want to give you a few words about wega for those of you who have no idea about who we are. So wega, we are a service provider company based in Basel, and we are offering informatic services in the life science and pharmaceutical sector. Our key mission is what we say, build a bridge between business and IT. So we've got people with a dual qualification, knowing very well the business and knowing also the IT component. And we are providing services for more than 20 years now, 27 years of experience of delivering, I would say, effective solutions to our customers. Wega is recognized as a quality solution provider. We are offering specialists, we are offering also services, and we cover the full life cycle from the process and requirement analysis to the implementation and the maintenance of systems. And that's where we are. In terms of company presentation, so we provide 360-degree services in the pharma, life science, and healthcare informatics. And we've got four main pillars of competency. And these four pillars are working very closely together and to ensure that we've got a end-to-end service for the pharma and life science sector. Our expertise domain are mainly lab and research, clinical development, computer system validation, and quality assurance, and also informatics solutions. And with these four domains of competency, we provide the full spectrum and support our customers in the different topics. Just want to give you some ideas. So in lab automation, of course, we are key in terms of digitalization of our laboratory, implementation of LIMS systems. We are also developing compound management, biobanking area, and chromatography. In research and clinical development, we are also designing and building the environment for data collection, data integration, process optimization. That's an area we are very proud of managing data curation, data standardization, and integration of data in data lake or data warehouse. We develop also data science. We implement machine learning, artificial intelligence, and NLP technology to provide more insights from our data. And last but not the least, also all these systems should be validated, and we are providing and developing company-specific computer system validation strategy to fit for the various regulatory environment we've got in research and pharmaceutical industry. So all in all, so that's the four pillars and the four domains. So if you want to know more about wega, you can reach our website and have a look on what we are doing. And please reach out to me and to via the website to us if you want to know more about wega. And so very successful. We grew up by 50% in the last 3 years, and so very proud to be part of this company. Quick upcoming events, just a quick information. So we are be part of the Paperless Lab Academy in April 2022, and we will also join, as always, Future Labs Live conference, which will be held in June in Basel. So if you have the opportunity to be there at these events, feel free to connect with us during this event. Now, unfortunately, as you know, we are making this virtual coffee. Normally, we are making a real face-to-face, but with the COVID situation, it's impossible to offer you a coffee and a breakfast. The best we can do is to provide a lot of tasty brain food, and I will hand over in a few minutes to Billy Hamsel to give you this food for your breakfast. But take a coffee and relax and just want to introduce and very warm welcome to Billy Hamsel. Billy Hamsel is a mathematical engineer from École Polytechnique, and he holds a PhD in Bayesian optimal design. So he's well-known expert with 20 years of experience. Billy has developed quantitative methodologies to inform strategic decision-making in healthcare. He is actually CEO of Quintal Health. And prior to join Quintal Health, Billy led the model-based drug development at Novartis, and he was also in charge of the real-world data and decision analytics at Certara. So as the CEO of Quintal, Billy is today leading a team of data scientists, modelers, and biomedical guys who are helping stakeholders across the healthcare value chain to make informed decisions and improve patients' care. And I'm very, very pleased to hand over to you, Billy Hamsel, for your presentation. Of course, you can use a chat box and you can put your Q&A and we will answer your question at the end of the presentation. Thanks a lot, and hand over to you, Billy.
Thank you very much. Now sharing my screen. Hope it works well. You see my screen well?
Yes.
Yes, great. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very, very happy and honored to have the chance to present to my first Vega breakfast. And I got my coffee, and I hope everybody is going to spend a relaxed start of the day together. And thanks also for the intro. Indeed, I am currently leading Quintal Health, which is a data science company. Very quick words. We are basically about 50 data scientists and healthcare modelers working across industry, care providers, and healthcare agencies, using basically all techniques to support decision making across the healthcare value chain with proprietary and state-of-the-art algorithms to support typically R&D and access decisions for pharma. So today I'm going to introduce you to a number of elements around what I call AI-powered disease modeling in real world for what I call value-based clinical development, where trial designs or drug development are not designed and prioritized only based on the alpha or beta risk that you typically use in power calculation, but looking beyond the time of authorization and the time of regulatory assessment, and looking at what would be the value of my drug or my device once it reached the market, when it reached the real world patients, and how prescribe what would be the impact of it once it reaches the real world. So that's very value based, because obviously it helps making decisions around what should be my population, what should be my endpoint, what should be my positioning in terms of in the treatment sequence. So we'll look at all these aspects in this presentation, starting with introductory remarks to set the objectives of this large topic. So we'll try to focus it a little bit, and also explain how combining RCT and real-world data through proper analytics could help towards this value-based clinical development. And one key component in this proper analytics is that it will be disease-centric analytics. So disease-centric and disease models fueled by a number of algorithms and modeling techniques could accommodate both RCT and real-world data and basically cover the different aspects of the disease that are required to design proper trials. And I will share a few examples to illustrate how such disease modeling, powered by a number of algorithmic modules, could support this value-based drug development using disease-centric approaches. And I will end my discussion, my presentation, with a vision forward towards basically not only disease models, but disease modeling platforms, where basically we will start envisioning how to standardize those approaches to make them industrializable and basically widely usable in a decision-making context. So with constraints in terms of timelines, in terms of compliance, in terms of regulatory grade quality, and so on. So let's move on. So why am I talking about disease-centric analytics for clinical development? What would be the value of such approaches? So clearly we could group them into, let's say, three main categories. First, to accelerate drug development, because you can optimize your the definition of your endpoints based on how good they could predict long term, for example. You could also, of course, accelerate by targeting the patients that are facing the needs, the most unmet needs. So that would typically translate operationally in terms of recruitment rate, so targeting faster recruitment, and of course allowing for more complex or innovative designs such as adaptive trial designs, by again capturing the disease progression in the design of the trials. It also to de-risk development, because as I was saying in intro, it's the uncertainty that we are capturing goes beyond the beta risk or the alpha risk in your trial design, by quantifying this risk over disease time, and by allowing the regulatory discussions around the indication. That's typically what happens once you complete your phase 3 trial and start negotiating with regulators around the indication. And that's this argumentation is also based on what would be the benefit risk in the long term in real world for your compound, and for that you need obviously to be able to simulate or to model the disease progression in real world. And finally, as I was also introducing, one key objective is also to maximize the real world value itself, and really reconcile basically the RCT designs with what makes value in the public health for payers and for patients. So those are the three typical objectives we can expect with disease-centric analytics. And this is not new. We have done this many times in different situations, and many examples have been published. Here a sample of where proper analytics based on advanced analytics like AI, ML, or data science applied to clinical data could support, for example, the development of a phase 2 in basically modeling the disease progression after the initiation of a treatment, in order to accelerate the trial itself, and therefore the time to market. It also, of course, largely used to basically improve the targets, so the patient's targets, so ultimately the inclusion criteria, by using all sorts of classification, predictive algorithms, and subgroup discovery algorithms to identify, for example, high responders, fast progressors, highest benefit risk patients or higher risk patients, according to the characteristics, and therefore optimize the trial designs using these analytics. And you can see the different impact or different dimension of those impacts in the success of the trials. Now, as I was mentioning also in intro here, we know that there are limitations in using trial data, especially if you want to model or to describe the whole disease progression. Trial data are not made for that, and there are many key differences that basically separate real-world data from trial data. And real-world data typically would capture the longer term, would capture other facets of the disease that may not be captured or are typically not captured by trial data. And real-world data would typically cover the real-world population better than those selected in trials. So obviously, trial data and real-world data convey different types of information, and we want to capture both for proper disease modeling. Sorry. So is it so straightforward to apply, those RCT analytics, like subgroup discovery algorithms or predictive algorithms to the real-world data for drug development? Well, we have had a number of recent examples. Sorry, this will be your 2 minutes for on COVID, and I promise this will be only a couple of slides, but it was a very good example where although there was a push and an acceleration around the use of real-world data for drug development to accelerate, obviously, the drug discovery and the time to market for drugs. And you could see in this, Lancet example that was very publicized in the news, that applying, standard analytics or advanced analytics that you typically do on trial data, applying them to real-world data is not straightforward, because there are a number of pharmacoepi aspects, pharmacoepidemiological aspects, or real-world data aspects that you need to cover, to address before obviously implementing such approaches in real-world data. And still, I'm sure you have seen this picture in the news also during the pandemics, where basically the news were showing model projections, disease model projections in this case, or patient flow projections under different scenarios, and that was basically an example where, again, the role of predictive modeling and the role of disease modeling was becoming transformational for public health decision making. And this was, in the news. You could see, our Prime Minister in France commenting those model outputs. And that's just to illustrate that, those disease predictive modeling is getting even more impactful and accepted by decision makers. Yet, back to the data types versus what you can inform in a disease continuum. Obviously, as I was saying, different data sources can inform different aspects or different parameters of such model. For example, claims databases that are typically real-world data would typically well inform the treatment sequencing over time much better than what you would get from obviously trial data. RCT data are very well designed to inform the efficacy parameter and the drivers of efficacy, while EHR, for example, would inform better the way patients are using or taking their drugs or adhering to a treatment pattern, treatment sequence. And of course, real-world data capture better the long-term longitudinality or the long-term risks typically. So you see, if you want to really cover all aspects from A to Z of the disease progression and the care pathway in real world, you need to combine different data sources and RCT and real world data. So ultimately, an approach, a vision to integrate all those data sources within a disease-centric modeling and simulation platform would be to to combine those data and process them with adequate analytics, so interpretable AI or machine learning, and we'll show a few examples on that. Very rigorous pharmacoepi methods to address, the typical bias or the typical real-world effect, like channeling effects, selection or propensity to prescribe a drug versus another in real world, and so on. So the real world data science combined with advanced analytics and machine learning, and combined with statistical modeling that would integrate those different insights into one platform, one modeling and simulation platform. And typically, the Bayesian inference would be a good way forward to integrate and to capture and quantify the uncertainty in a, let's say, dynamic way and flexible way. But typically, if you are, if you want to build such disease model in real world, you need to capture also the care pathway and the exposure patterns in real world, and it goes together, obviously. So that's typically a dynamic longitudinal model to be developed and to basically embed in a simulator, because at the end of the day, you would need to simulate, what if scenario, what if my drug is positioned here or there, what would be the long-term outcomes if I choose an endpoint that is short-term, and how predictive it is of the long-term, and so on and so forth. So that's really the ultimate integrative vision that we can push forward if if we want to use those disease-centric approaches, combining multiple data sources with multiple analytics approaches. And beyond, maybe a word on the use of such disease modeling platform beyond drug development decisions making. You could also envision that that's not that same simulator can be used for other decision making by regulators, by public health decision makers, but also by care providers, because once you can project long-term outcomes for a given patient that you have in front of you as a physician, that could enable a number of precision care solutions that you can imagine for personalized prognosis, for better diagnosis or earlier diagnosis, and so on. Now, if I can summarize, basically real-world value-based drug development that I was introducing relies on the robust ability to basically project long-term benefit risk in real world, and also capturing the key sources of heterogeneity and variability. And this is where you need different analytical methods that combines disease-wide modeling and simulation, but also some machine learning or AI to uncover the different patterns in care, for example, or in disease progression, to identify subgroups of high response or progression, and so on, and ultimately combine also with what I call generically real-world data science that includes, the pharmacoepi expertise and the understanding of real-world data and real-world prescription patterns. So that's basically the idea, to really combine those different data sources, different methodologies, to ultimately combine them into a disease cohort simulator that allows you to bridge efficacy to effectiveness, and ultimately to, if you use it to in the context of drug development, to design real-world value-based trials. Now let's share a few examples that won't cover all aspects with all data, but starting with different dimension or different illustration of the tools I was mentioning. So this is wide modeling, AI, ML, and real-world data science. Starting with an example in Alzheimer's disease, because like many neurodegenerative diseases, those Alzheimer or those neurologic conditions evolve slowly over time. In the case of Alzheimer, the treatment patterns are pretty limited, but you can also imagine other indications or other diseases like multiple sclerosis, where the treatment patterns are pretty can be pretty full and pretty dynamic. And of course, you see that that's a challenge from a drug developer perspective. That's typically a challenge to develop feasible trials within reasonable timing and reasonable sizing, due to this long-term progression. And of course, if you once the outcomes, the severe clinical outcomes are start to appear, then it may be too late to start a treatment. So there is this typical issue and challenge for such long-term neurodegenerative diseases. Their disease-centric approaches would be a definitive asset in such a disease. And for that, we need to shift the mindset from the trial designing standards, and typically switching the mindset from trial time to disease time once you want to leverage from these disease-centric approaches. Obviously, in trial time, time zero is the inclusion time of inclusion, which covers a very large and heterogeneous types of patients, and of course the progression profile may be very widely variable across patients, between patients, when you are basically looking at trial time. If you switch to disease time, obviously the time frame is larger, typically in long-term chronic diseases, but you may be capturing better, obviously, the disease progression patterns, and that's what you need to again to be able to model disease over time. So that's a shift that is very important in order to again well-defined short-term outcomes or short-term endpoints for your trial that would be predictive for the long term once the disease has progressed. So for the let's share some thoughts around this Alzheimer's disease modeling, and I picked this one because it was also an interesting framework of development, because it was within a public-private partnership that I'm sure you are familiar with, the IMI European partnerships, where basically academic teams join forces with pharma companies and with regulators or payers around a topic, and this was the roadmap project, where basically real world disease modeling for Alzheimer was jointly developed to end up with a reference real world disease model that could be used by pharma for regulators and payers to design trials, to design economic studies, and to basically make robust the choices of the endpoints to be used in those trials, for example. And so there are a number of references that are listed here, but basically just to illustrate what was the work around this disease modeling. So typically, that AD has been traditionally suspected based on clinical symptoms and confirmed after death based on brain examination, but it's too late. It's too late. And once you are looking at the clinical manifestations of the disease, based or even the severe memory effects, it's often too late. What you want to do is understand what happens earlier, before it's too late, or before those severe manifestations. So based on biomarkers or scores that would basically predict the long-term progression. And as drug developers, you want to be able to to quantify what should be an effect of those biomarker or on those cognitive score, that would be predictive enough of an effect on what you want to avoid ultimately. So the clinical manifestation of Alzheimer, like severe loss of memory or death or dementia, that would be very invalid for the patients. So, but you cannot design 10-year long trials. So you need to have some sufficiently robust evidence to project this short-term effect on the long-term impact. And you need that this argumentation is somewhat qualified and validated by regulators. So that's why this public-private approach is very powerful in this context. Now, there is no one-size-fits-all modeling approach, and many of you, I think, are statisticians or modelers, so, and are familiar with those analytical techniques, and you know that it covers a number of different types of modeling. And when we say this is modeling, it may be very misleading sometimes because it can be used in different contexts for different types of data or different structure of models. Typically, you can, for Alzheimer's disease, when we say disease models, it could cover pathological models that are mechanism-based and basically tracking biomarkers using PK/PD approaches or pharmacodynamic models on some biomarkers. It could also cover longitudinal modeling, basically tracking a score over time or a level of biomarkers over time from a statistical standpoint. And it could be at a larger scale and really looking at time to event. So purely statistical survival analysis, typically, that are typically used, for example, in the context of economic modeling and payers assessments. Those different models are fed typically by different data sources. There are more tribal data when we speak about physiologically based models or pathological models, and they are more using long-term real-world data when it comes to more statistical models and less mechanistic, and especially for time to event, where basically the events of interest are risks or diagnosis, like dementia diagnosis or severe diagnosis that could be captured by real-world data, like claims databases, for example. Which means that, of course, on the analytical side, those models are very different. They range from differential equations to mixed effects models for repeated events to survival analysis and time to event. and they cover different types of outcomes, from biomarkers to scores and tests over time to time to diagnosis. Now, if we ambition an integrative approach, integrating different analytical methods and different data sources, you want to kind of combine them together, and that's where it's you start to consider, of course, the pathology, but not necessarily here using mechanistic equations to inform to structure the model. You could, but it was not the case here. It was just the pathology here and the dynamics, biological dynamics underlying the disease progression was used to inform the structure of both longitudinal models and time to event models, basically to result this into to combine this into what we call the joint model that would combine a longitudinal outcome model that would track a biomarker or a score, a cognitive score over time, with time to events, so time to diagnosis for MCI, so mild cognitive impairment diagnosis, which is the first clinical manifestation in the patients, and time to dementia, which is the severe one coming later. So this is what we have developed. We published only a part of it here, using joint modeling, describing again both this cognitive score here that was defined by some medical study, a dedicated study, a composite score that would track the cognition progression, the cognitive function over time, and combine it, statistically combine it with a time to event approach here, time to MCI and time to dementia, in order ultimately to help designing trials based on this score with sufficient reliability and trust and confidence that if the endpoint is met, then we can reliably think that there will be an effect, a sizable effect on the time to the MCI or the time to dementia. That what matters ultimately for patients, for regulators and payers, obviously. So so that was published in through different posters and reports And unfortunately, as you know, in the Alzheimer context, the drugs, the ongoing trials were failed because they were not designed using these models, and they were basically the effect was diluted in the viability. So the next generation of trials have been based on these approaches widely, but it's not enough because you also need to better characterize who are the responders or who are the fast progressors that may benefit the most of a new treatment, because you can imagine that very slow progressors may die from something else, and so they may not be the best candidate for a drug, and even less for a trial design. So that you need to to also refine also the progression profiles in terms of sequence of events that may be also may differ from a patient to another. And there are many other analytical questions that you may raise to improve the approach and to make, again, like to de-risk those trials that are very challenging, and to ensure that the treatments reaching the market will have a real tangible value on patients. So for that, I will start to and we'll share another example that will address a different aspect of trial design using real-world data science and machine learning. And I will, describe a little bit now how enriched trial can improve inclusion criteria and basically better align the trial objectives with the real-world value. So now, with the Alzheimer example, I was discussing the endpoint definition of a trial. Now I'm looking at the target population, how real-world data and proper analytics can support better inclusion criteria. So that's a typical problem where you are facing high heterogeneity in disease progression, and you may have also upcoming competition that put your trial or your confirmatory trial even at higher risk, and that's even more pregnant for rare diseases where you cannot necessarily subdivide the disease into a very small and niche indication, because it's a rare condition, and so you need to be very careful with the size of the target population you are looking at. Now, and you have also a recruitment challenge typically in rare diseases. So you really want to target like most easily recruitable patients that would benefit the most of your drug in development, and that would basically where you could mitigate this heterogeneity in both response and progression. So the objective here of this study was to basically de-risk a phase 3 program using such disease-centric approaches and real-world data analytics. So the idea is to enrich phase 3 designs with real-world data analytics, and that has been done in a number of settings already. And there were some guidelines published also by regulators on this to speed up recruitment and to again de-risk the trials, meaning increase the chance of success in terms of efficacy. So maybe to remind you on what we mean with trial enrichment, that you can define your inclusion criteria based on what you expect in patient response, and to make sure that you will be capturing only or mostly the efficacy parameter by targeting the right patients. But of course, there will be a difference between what you would target as population, so like the indication you would target, the study population that you define in your protocol, and ultimately the enrolled population that is basically typically very different from your study population, especially in rare diseases, because you will be selecting a lot based on the recruitment operations typically. So at the end of the day, there may be a mismatch, or at least a distance between this enrolled population in your trial effectively and basically the population you were targeting. And this target population may also be different from the real world actual users, those patients that would benefit the most, that you may not have targeted ultimately, but that they could use and benefit from your drugs. So the enrichment that we are talking about here is really to basically bridge the gap between the enrolled population and the real world users ultimately that you should be targeting ultimately, or that basically would benefit most of your treatment. And that's what basically make the value ultimately of a compound once it reaches the market. So the whole idea is really to enrich the trial design, so to relax some of the inclusion criteria based on what you observe in the real world and the unmet needs that you observe in real world populations. And this has been illustrated and structured and developed for, again, also within the IMI project. So you may know about this Geocentric project that was around basically incorporating real world data and real world insights in the trial design phase. Here it was an example in schizophrenia and using the SOHO cohort data. And the whole idea was to basically, relax those inclusion criteria to allow, for example, 10% of patients that you would have typically excluded based on the standard design process. But you would re-include those patients based on what you learn from real world data in terms of their need, of their response to the treatments. And the idea now is to predict and compare with what you would expect in the real life once the treatment reaches the market. So there was this analysis done. It was done like univariately, criterion by criterion, testing one by one to see, okay, if I relax this one, what would be my prediction accuracy? How good can I predict the long-term real world with my trial results? And what would be my chance of success? Because of course you don't want to impair your probability of success of your trial. So there were this large simulation exercise that was performed again univariately and using standard statistics, say, and modeling approaches, but really demonstrating how retrospectively such a trial design may have been improved in terms of representativity, in terms of population target size, and ultimately in terms of indication, because that's typically what the type of arguments again that could be discussed, that are discussed with regulators to decide on the indication once the phase 3 trials is over. So now, obviously, you want to be you could refine those approaches and basically addressing the approach with more machine learning techniques to better characterize this heterogeneity and do better than univariate approaches. And that's an example where we could implement similar approaches on a rare disease for trial enrichment using real-world data analytics, but incorporating clustering on progression profiles to even better target and better characterize the progression, and therefore better target those high-value patients in the designs. So we started by basically expanding the initial target population for this drug that was really focusing on very fast progressors. But as you see in this real-world data profiles of progression over time, you can see that the original target was very limited, so very, very restrictive, too restrictive. So basically suggesting that there would be a high severe recruitment issues here. So you would like to enlarge, enrich the trial, but still maintain, of course, the probability of success by focusing on the fast progressors that would respond also best to the treatment. So classification algorithms were applied on progression profiles and progression rates, allowed to enlarge these targets. This was based on real-world data profiles. Now we had to map those real-world patients with those real-world outcomes to what we expect in RCT patients, and also to map the outcomes and variables that are captured in real-world data to what we can observe and measure in trials. So there was this mapping, this outcomes mapping that we had to implement, and to also ensure that patients could be identified properly in the real world the same way as they would in RCT data. So there would also this diagnosis algorithms mapping to implement. Then once we had basically different options for enrichment, so different targets that again balance the size and the effect and the chance of success, we could basically compare them via simulations and compare what would be the effectiveness, the long-term effectiveness for different subgroups, so that we could basically measure and compare the values. And we implemented a simulator here to simulate for different scenarios, different enrichment strategies, what would be the impact in terms of recruitment rate and ultimately in terms of population size in real world, but also in terms of effectiveness projection and potentially benefit risk as well, which again are the metrics that you put on the table with regulators when discussing the indication. Now, I'm stopping here with examples, and now I'm going to discuss to finish my presentation. I'm going to discuss if how we could proceed to integrate those different facets around disease modeling and simulation, around real-world data science and machine learning and AI, towards a more integrative approach that would be transformational for drug development, and typically moving from POC or pilot or project to platform, and to develop such disease modeling tools that could be used widely in drug development. So why am I discussing this? Why am I talking about platformized disease cohort simulators? Well, you see in the few examples, and they cover only a part of what we call real-world disease modeling, but still you can imagine the time, the effort to access the data, to implement ad hoc modeling or analytical algorithms, to engage with stakeholders, to publish results. I mean, this evidence generation may work, but it's definitely not scalable. It takes a lot of time and energy, and the time it takes to deliver is often not compatible with this decision-making time for drug developers, for regulatory assessments. So you need to accelerate this evidence generation, but of course keeping the quality and even ensuring that the quality and the robustness and the reliability of the results are meeting the regulatory grade standards and quality. So you want to also to have common to be able to define those common standards and to comply with them. In addition, you want to maintain you want to be able to maintain these modeling tools, really switching from these one-shot approaches to maintained product that you can reuse also for trial design, as I was illustrating today. But as I was also saying before, same tool could be, same virtual cohort simulator could be used for other purposes, for medical functions, for example, in pharma, for pricing, to define real-world value and value-based pricing by projecting in the long term the public health impact. It can be used also to position drugs in a sequence, to differentiate in real world, and ultimately beyond the pharma companies, it can be used for other purposes, for care or public health decision making, using the same backbone model. So that's something that you want to generate, and that will bring a lot of value. Now, how to do this? Again, as I was illustrating, combining different techniques, so AI and machine learning to characterize the patterns, to characterize the heterogeneity sources, and to quantify them, using real-world data science to capture the specificities of real-world data and to allow the combination of them with RCT trial data, and use the state-of-the-art integrative analytics and modeling, such as Bayesian inference, that could manage efficiently the uncertainty dynamically, so with minimal effort to update a model once you have a new data source coming in. When I speak about platform, I'm sure it rings a bell in terms of IT infrastructure, but also in terms of data infrastructure. And typically, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, and you want to leverage from those data platforms. And you have seen in the past decade the explosion of, or the epidemics of real-world data platforms that were launched on the market, or from commercial organization, but also from public organization. In France, for example, we have the Health Data Hub being launched and being very integrative in terms of real-world data, research data, and trial data in one common hub. Similar data space is in development at the European level, led by the EMA, so for regulatory purposes as well. And you have plenty also of real-world data platforms for commercial organizations that now are more and more used for a number of decision making in pharma and healthcare in general. How also I mentioned in this Alzheimer example, in this IMI settings, I mentioned that I illustrated how coalition and public-private approaches make a lot of sense to make it possible, because you don't want to end up with a Pfizer model, a Novartis model. You want to go what we target here is really reference models. That's the only way forward to to address the vision we are discussing here. So coalition approach makes a lot of sense. Now, getting back to this vision of what could be a disease-centric modeling and simulation platform, as we were discussing in intro. So the idea here is to combine all those different analytical modules that I have for some illustrated, but you can imagine subgroup identification algorithms based on advanced machine learning. You can also envision sequence mining to describe and to profile the patterns of progression or of treatments in real world. You can use NLP techniques to automate basically the evidence synthesis from the literature. For example, through NMAs to quickly compare efficacy based on published results in a given indication. You need also predictive algorithms, of course, especially discrete event predictions and classification. You need also to deal with omics data and potentially system biology models as well. And you need to have also to incorporate causal inference to structure well the causal chain as much as possible, and basically allows for this end-to-end disease modeling. So that's basically the ambition to platformize again this approach, and illustrate the use of such a platform for all the questions that you may think when you are basically designing a trial or defending an indication with a regulator, with the EMA. So, for example, as I was also exemplifying here, if you want to optimize criteria for inclusion, so for example, via trial enrichment, as I was illustrating, so you would basically involve different parts of this platform for heterogeneity assessment using machine learning, for the identification of drivers of effect and effectiveness using disease progression profiling or real-world data methodologies, and you need ultimately to use the cohort simulator to basically simulate what-if scenarios and basically maximize the difference versus a competitor, for example. So that's basically where, for each use cases that you encounter in a trial design process, you could involve different techniques, different data sources to in a standard way, basically, to address your needs. And it can go from endpoint definition, proxy definitions, to of course defining an external control arm, for example, or to project long-term benefit risk as an evidence, as a piece of evidence to be also discussed with regulators in the context of label defense or label extension. So, and so on the architecture side, obviously you would need to, as I was saying, to rely on existing platform ultimately, or you can build one, but you can rely on existing ones. There are, plenty of real-world data platforms. For example, the Etion, you may know the Etion platform that are engaged with the FDA, trying to reproduce or understand what is the difference between RCT and real-world data studies. They have, you can leverage from those platforms, but also from KOL registries in specific diseases. You can leverage from hospital networks that are, also put in place by many organizations, and really platformize basically all those AI and analytics modules into one platform that would be structured by disease, and where basically an application could be developed, multiple applications could be developed and plugged to this reference disease model to answer different questions for different stakeholders, different functions in the pharma industry, but also in care or in hospitals. The applications could be optimal design. That was the topic of today, but it could be again optimal pricing. It could be optimal treatment at the point of care, and so on. Ultimately, we want these tools to be able to be qualified for evidence generation by the users and by the regulators of those usages.
Billy, we have like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I will be very quick. Just saying that yes, the regulatory setting and environment is moving forward. It's not new, but it is accelerating around the use of real-world data and the use of AI/ML as well, both in the US and in Europe. Guidelines are on their way, and basically the regulation in Europe, for example, is imminent around the launch of the data platforms, the health data space, European health data space, and the Darwin platform is already active. And the use of such analytics will be also regulated by 2024. So that's coming. That's the right time to engage. So that's, I think, will be transformational for drug development. And I will stop here to open for questions. And I would like again to thank you for your attention and to allow me to discuss these important issues together. So I'm open to any questions or remarks or comments for discussion, and happy also to share some references, some publications to illustrate what I discussed today or what I have not time to had no time to discuss, obviously.
Maybe I will start, Billy. So thanks a lot for your presentation. Very, very informative. A lot of information today. I just have a question regarding the disease, because you mentioned this modeling for different disease, and you give us some example with some types of disease. So my question would be, which type of disease today is the most appropriate to benefit from your platform and your modeling approach?
That's a good question. So I would say that I would start with the highest unmet needs, basically where you have you have data, but you have challenges to develop drugs. So that was the case for Alzheimer, as it is the case for a lot of neurodegenerative diseases. That's one. It is also very applicable to rare diseases that are often also overlapping with neurodegenerative ones, because so there are long-term diseases where data are sparse. So you want to kind of optimize the information from the data through modeling. So that's one way to integrate different sources of information and ultimately increase the power and the chance of success of your trials. So rare diseases is also another one. And we have also those complex cancers with high heterogeneity, crowded markets or crowded therapeutic options that makes very complex to find a way for trial design, because there will be a lot of recruitment issues or bias coming from recruitment selection. There will be a lot of differentiation questions. So there, for breast cancers, for example, or lung cancer, it makes a lot of sense to also develop such approaches.
Thanks, Billy. Any other question from the team on the line? I've got a second one, Billy. If may I, regarding data. So you mentioned your partnership with Hysion for the data platform in the US. So what about in the Europe? So do we have access to this type of data in Europe, or what is the situation at the moment?
So indeed, so Hysion is an American company, but they are also accessing European data, like CGDIM data, for example, or CPRD. So those are commercial data, but the ambition here is to go beyond commercial data. It's good to start with those data because they are easily accessible and they are informative. But we want to typically go beyond that, and that's why we engage. You need to engage with for example, cancer association or key opinion leader, key academics in lung cancer or in specific diseases where you could access deep and quality data in real world, typically a large cohort data that would be very informative for such a modeling. And such you typically have a lot of difficulty to access those data, but through those modeling platforms, that would be possible. So you would get access to at least the insights from the data that you need. And so that's why we engage with those key academic partners or data owners by disease. Obviously, those modeling platforms is of high value for them as well, because this is a research platform for them as well. So they have obviously they see a benefit on their way, and that's also also a way to basically build up those public-private approaches and coalition approaches, where part of the members are data owners like those academics. So different data sources, and of course the IP is managed accordingly. That's one sensitive question as well, to how is data privacy of course maintained, but what would be the IP once you develop your platform on those data or data. So this is managed in a seamless framework to ensure that obviously IP rights are respected basically. But the good thing is that you don't need to share data. I mean, once the platform is developed, you don't need the data anymore, because you can use this simulator, and that's much more transportable than data. That's one also advantage from a IT perspective and data privacy perspective.
Thank you. Any question, Christian, on the line or on the chat? Or
maybe one quick question.
Yeah.
You said you don't need the model, you don't need the data once you have the model. How do you make sure that your model retains accuracy over time? Because things might change, right, for whatever reason.
You're right, and that's why you need a platform to maintain and update your platform like every year or at regular times, because you're right, things changes, new treatment reach the market, populations are dynamic, so that's very important to maintain the core models, and also the local instances as data are available and as epidemiology of the disease is changing.
Thank you.
So, any more questions? No. I mean, if not, then let also me thank a lot to Billy. It was very inspiring. So thanks for being with us, and thanks to everyone for sticking with us until the end for this interesting talk. And see you next time at the next Vega breakfast, hopefully in person soon.
Yeah, we hope so. Thanks a lot, Billy, for your nice presentation. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Take care. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, bye, bye.